Today we will be going over some of the most important stats as a wizard that I should be focusing on. Now this is a question that I come across quite a lot, people asking me what should they be focusing on as a wizard when it comes to secondary stats. Now we know a lot of players tend to focus on the resonance that increase your base life and base damage, which could be somewhat important, but that isn't everything. You can try and increase your resonance, that is going to increase your base damage and life, but that isn't everything. You will feel a lot stronger and tougher and do quite a lot more damage if you try and work on your secondary stats. And a lot of that comes from your primary gear, and a lot of that comes from your secondary gear as well. And you can see that on your stats here, the amount of strength that you have. Well, as I said, you don't need strength. This doesn't give us anything. What we should be focusing on is getting intelligence, but it's not that important from the primary gear or the secondary gear. At least in my opinion, all you should be focusing on is try and get as much fortitude you can get. It will increase your armor, and armor can block some of the damage that you receive, and it can also reduce the critical hit on your character. Super important. We will dive into a bit more in a sec. And again, vitality isn't that great. I would not advise trying to go for a vitality. And what you should be focusing on is going to be fortitude. It will increase armor and armor penetration, and then you should be focusing on willpower. That will help you increase your potency and resistance that we will talk about in a sec. So in my opinion, some of the most important stats are going to be focusing on fortitude and willpower on all your gear pieces like that. I don't even try and go for the triple anymore, but I do keep some of those items in my stash for content that require me to have a bit more combat rating, like the raids or the challenge rift. So I keep some of those equipment here in my stash. I just quickly put this on, go and do the raids and challenge rift, and I am done and back to using the gear that gives me more fortitude and willpower. And that is the same case with most of my secondary gear as well, focusing on the fortitude and the willpower. Now, before we go any further, another thing that you can try and do is try and get some of the magic attributes as a wizard as well. There are a couple of other special magic attributes out there, but most of them is good for melee classes. I will give you guys an example. There is a endure magic attributes that you can get. It increases your ovation rating, but that ovation rating will only be increased as you will be surrounded by more than 1, 2, 3 players. The more players surround you, the more ovation rating you will get. But as a wizard, you stay at distance, so we don't need to get that ovation rating. Now I will give you guys an example here. So I believe I have something here. You can see endure heal for 1.2% of your maximum life every second while out of combat. Now this could be somewhat decent as you play at distance. Sometimes you have damage over time on yourself, or you just want to go away and heal yourself. If you don't have the bandage, you can try and have this on yourself. This is something that will help you. And this is another one here. Endure 8% of the overhealing is converted into a shield up to a 20% of your maximum life. Now this will give you some shield as you heal up, somewhat decent. And then we have a resistance here, again a shield equal to 15% of your maximum life for 5 seconds while falling below 10% life. There is another one, endure, that gives you a shield every 12 seconds, I believe. So it happens when you use something. I don't have that currently on me, so my apologies for that. But these two you can actually get from a rune as well, I believe. Let me see. That comes on the legs here, heal for 1.2% of your maximum life every second while out of combat, and 10% of the over heal is converted into a shield. So some of these stats you can get from the runes as well, but keep an eye out for some of these if you can get it with like block chance, beneficial effect duration increase, critical hit chance is going to be super important as a wizard as well. You can see I have up to 33% critical hit chance, but keep one thing in mind, I'm also using the legendary runes here that gives me the critical hit chance up to 4% on each offhand, so I get 8% critical hit chance increase from the offhand. In my opinion, one of the best things you can get as a wizard. And another one is going to be using the beneficial one is on the shoulder. There we go, giving you a bit more beneficial duration increase. Now this will be strive in PvP, but still it is really important. So these are some of the stats, the magic attributes you can focus on as well. Now let's dive back to the secondary attributes and why we should try and get armor and armor penetration. Let's start with the armor. So if we click here on the armor, it says reduce all damage taken and increase the block amount. Your armor is 1300 higher than the expected for your level in your current activity and difficulty, increasing your damage reduction from blocking by 17% from a base reduction of 50%. But this is for a PvE scenario right now, the Inferno 4 difficulty. But when we go in PvP, it will be somewhat working a bit differently. It all comes down to who you are fighting in PvP. For example, if there is someone out there I am fighting in PvP who has let's say 6000 armor penetration, then I won't be getting any of these bonuses, or I won't be getting this much bonus, and the critical hit damage versus me will be quite high because I don't have enough armor to block or reduce the amount of critical hit damage that I take. So if I can, let's say, increase this armor to 7000 and they had 6000 armor pen, then I would be blocking some of that damage, flat out blocking some of those damage, and the critical hit damage will be reduced on me as well. But as a wizard, we don't get close and personal all that much. The reason why my armor is lower compared to some of the other stats, but still it is really important. I do want to push this a bit more, but like I said, as a wizard we stay at distance, don't get close and personal, and mostly only sometime end up fighting 1 versus 1. And so that is how the armor will be working. Now let's move on to the armor penetration. Ignore some enemies armor. So if you can have more armor penetration, as I said before, your critical hit damage versus them will be higher and they won't able to block your hits all that much. Why a lot of players tend to focus on armor penetration so they can do some quick damage, and it does give you a really good result. And I do want to get this over 6000, but that is going to take some time, at least for me. And now let's talk about potency and resistance. I think explaining potency is going to give you a good idea of what resistance will do. So what is potency? I will try and explain it. So potency basically work with total loss of control, which could be fear, necromantic and fear, or let's say wizard. We are talking about a wizard. You can freeze a place, or there are some control effects like you use this wind, arcane wind, and it pulls enemies within. That is a control effect. And the more potency you will have, it will last on plays for a bit longer. So if someone has quite a lot of resistance compared to your potency, they will able to escape your arcane wind quite easier. And even if you freeze them, if we go take a look here at the skill, it says we can freeze enemies. Force will now grant you a creeping chill for 5 seconds, and we can freeze the place for 2 seconds. So even so, it says we can freeze the place for 2 seconds, but if they have more resistance compared to your potency, that duration of 2 seconds will be reduced. So why having potency is really important, super important in my opinion. Not only your control effect like the wind, but your freeze effects will last longer on them as well. And even some of the gems that we have, like the everlasting, the duration of this gem will be increased because it is somewhat linked with potency. So if you can have really high potency compared to someone resistance, your control effect, your freeze effect, your gems harmful effect will last on them for longer. And why it is super important as a wizard to work on your potency, and having high resistance is also really important. We stay at distance and we do not want to get stun locked by a tempest or a barbarian or any class that try and come at you, try and stun you. You need to have your resistance at good, somewhat good level. So if someone try and do that, you can get out of that quicker, teleport away, and it will make it harder for other classes to kill you. Another thing that you can try and do is add 2 pieces of feasting barrier, increase the duration of your harmful effect. Now this will work with again your viper bite, your seeping bile. Even if you are using the everlasting, that bleed, it will increase the duration of this gem. And if you have high potency, then yeah, it will last for really long on plays. Why it is super important to have potency and even resistance in my opinion. And another thing that is super important, if we click on the potency, it says here increasing the duration by 36%. So what does this mean? So if we go back here, skills, click on the frost field, go down, it says that we can freeze players for 2 seconds or enemies for 2 seconds. But if we go back here, you can see since my potency is higher, the duration of those harmful effects or the freeze will be increased by 36 seconds. So you can basically increase the duration of your control effects, your freeze effect, and harmful gems like seeping bile, viper bite, everlasting, and you can extend that duration even more by adding increase the duration of your harmful effects by 30%. You will be like a really annoying player in a PvP. And so why it is super important as a wizard in my opinion to at least focus on armor penetration, potency, and resistance, so you can stop this from happening on yourself, because there will be other wizards out there trying to freeze you, put dot on you. So if you have high resistance, you can stop that from happening on yourself and do this to other players. So hopefully this will be a good guide for new players or even someone who've been playing for a while, and give you some informative information. And if you are wondering how I build my sanctum here, this is what I have done. I don't have anything in the damage or damage live or live. Basically everything goes into armor penetration, armor, potency, resistance, potency, and again you guys get the idea. I don't care that much about damage, but you can try and get them to like rank 10. That should be fine, but I will highly advise you guys to focus on the secondary stats. Another thing that you can do, some players like to do it, they focus on few things more than the other. For example, they will put everything in the armor penetration and then put everything in the potency and ignore resistance and armor, so they can be like that, like they can do more critical damage and ignore other players armor with their armor penetration, and ignore other players resistance with their higher potency, putting more harmful effects on them. But it will not work for everyone, so having somewhat balanced stats might be the best thing for most players. But that is something a couple of players out there been doing and getting a decent result. But keep one thing in mind, There are some of the veteran players who've been playing PvP for some time, and their play style might be different from most players. But anyhow, I'm signing off. See you all in the next one. Hopefully, guys, have a great day later.